Many thanks to Michael W., a software engineer who asked me, can you make a video about the branches and concepts in maths that you recommend for someone to take so that they can become a better programmer? That's a great question. And although I have noticed over the years a tendency to tell young kids that they could get into computing and even specifically into programming without having to do any maths, I think it's worth digging a little deeper. Welcome to Frank Stajano Explains. I am professor in the Department of Computer Science and Computer Technology of the University of Cambridge, and I run this channel to inspire and guide enterprising computer scientists. I have made all my university lectures publicly available to the world on this channel, raising some eyebrows. If you find this material interesting, then please hit the like button. It costs nothing to you, but it really helps the channel becoming more visible and reaching more people who might like it. Okay, even though the very name computer, at least in English, but not in all languages, just as the French, for example, suggests a machine for performing arithmetic operations, it would be more proper to describe a computer as a machine for manipulating information. And that information could be anything from network packets to natural language words to geographical maps to audio samples from a Bach symphony to frames of a video of a Cambridge professor talking about computing and mathematics. And it is only relatively rarely that any arithmetic is performed on any of these pieces of data. So it's certainly possible to learn to program without using any more mathematics than what you learn in primary school, if even that. And so in a sense, it is quite correct to tell children that you don't need maths for programming. And it may have been a beneficial thing to tell them that in order to remove barriers for entry into computing for those who hated mathematics when they were at school. Because some of these maths-hating kids might still enjoy computing and even become good at it. But if we were to put mathematics as a strict prerequisite, then they would never even get started with computers. They wouldn't want to go anywhere near them. Now, having said that, there is so much affinity between the mindsets of those who are good at maths and those who are good at computing that I suspect, and I haven't done any proper scientific experiments, but I suspect that if someone enjoys programming but hates maths, it's not so much because they have an innate adversity towards maths, but probably because they once had a lousy maths teacher. But if they like computing, then with the right guidance, they might find maths really enjoyable too, and vice versa. And it is in recognition of this affinity of mindsets that the CSAT, the extremely difficult entrance test that some Cambridge colleges, including Trinity, use to admit candidates to our computer science course, and to which I devoted another video, is largely based on mathematically flavored puzzles. Because even if you have never been taught programming, an aptitude for mathematics is a pretty good indicator of your aptitude for computing as well. Maths is the great explainer of the universe. It's the foundation of so many things, both in nature and in technology, that it's difficult to find a scientific discipline where an understanding of maths doesn't help in some way or other. Although the specific kind of mathematics you need to support and improve your understanding of computer science is rather different from the kind of mathematics you need to support, say, physics or engineering or economics, it is still the case that a grounding in mathematics will give you structure, will give you a mental roadmap, will give you a mental key to interpret the inner workings of many things. So it's worth investing in that as a piece of general culture, because some basic fluency in maths will make you better at whatever else you do, even if you're never going to be a mathematician. I said that the mindset of maths and the mindset of computer science are closely related. When I was little, I loved mathematics, and I hated subjects like history and geography. Apologies to my esteemed colleagues who are professors of history, although I'm sure they won't be watching the channel anyway. But let me be honest about why this was so for me. While I loved other humanities subjects such as philosophy, art, and literature and so on, in history and geography I had to memorize a bunch of dates and names and facts, mostly stuff I wasn't interested in, which sounded really dull and didn't involve any reasoning. Whereas in maths, I could work it all out from first principles, and that felt like a much more rewarding activity, something where I was using my brain actively instead of just using it as a storage medium. And in computing too, you can derive everything from first principles. It's not about learning anything by heart. It's about building things piece by piece from the ground up. And so long as you follow the rules, you can build anything you like. It's like having a Lego kit where you never run out of pieces because they're just made of ones and zeros and you have an infinite supply of them, limited only by your imagination. And that's incredibly empowering and incredibly creative and incredibly liberating. And that's why the two subjects of mathematics and computing appeal to two largely overlapping types of brain. Now, I'm probably preaching to the converted here because if you, Michael W., asked me that question, then I imagine you already agree with me on the fact that maths is somehow useful for computer science. So let me get to your more specific point. Exactly what parts of mathematics are most useful to become a better programmer? I would say those parts that support abstractions, logical reasoning, formalizing abstract thought. Computing is largely about building things out of abstract thoughts, building arbitrarily complex machinery out of simple manipulations of zeros and ones, which with a little bit of indirection can represent any other imaginable symbols. In fact, at some level, all the machine is ever doing is transforming strings of zeros and ones into other strings of zeros and ones. That's all there is to it. And the parts of mathematics that are going to be most useful to a programmer are the ones that help us systematize abstract thoughts. Understanding rules, understanding the rules for making more rules, understanding formal systems, and I teach a part of a university course on that, and you can check my lectures up there. Logic, rigorous proofs of formal statements, all that kind of, let's say, meta mathematics, and when I say meta, there's no connection whatsoever to Mr. Zuckerberg. That stuff is fundamental to computer science. Sets and relations are pretty fundamental stuff for a programmer as well, and so is the stuff that directly follows from them. So classifying and abstracting and transforming, groups and rings and fields and isomorphisms, which give you a flavor for abstracting away the important properties of familiar arithmetic operators like addition and multiplication. So when you study group theory, you understand that having a neutral element like 0 for addition, okay, is a pretty generic concept, and you can have a neutral element for many other operators, such as you have 1 for multiplication, it's a neutral element, but also for non-arithmetic operators, such as the concatenation of strings. This is not an arithmetic thing, it's a computing thing, and what's the neutral element there? Or for any other operators you might define yourself. You can reason about automorphisms, identity, idempotence, and so forth. Abstract properties of operators. And this abstract reasoning about operators is an important intellectual tool for a programmer. When I was little, this kind of stuff was called modern mathematics. It's not difficult. You can teach these ideas to a 10-year-old. And indeed, they were teaching me that at school. But my father, who was originally a physicist by training and then a computer scientist for the first half of his professional career, was very surprised and impressed and delighted about that, because he had never seen set theory taught below university level. But it is truly basic and fundamental stuff that even a child can learn. Another thing my father particularly enjoyed was when he found out that in primary school they were teaching me the binary system. None of that stuff is inherently hard. You just need a good teacher who explains it clearly and makes it fun. When you program, you do a lot of sets and relations and classifying and transforming, even if you might not use the same terminology as the mathematicians. But you had better have a solid mental framework for dealing with it, and set theory gives you that. Take, for example, Cantor's theorem about the cardinality of sets, and particularly of infinite sets. How could anyone with a hacker spirit, anyone who enjoys programming for its own sake, not be fascinated by Cantor's theorem? It's so beautiful, so paradoxical, so cheekily impish, and at the same time so deep. Have a look at my short video about it. It's really good fun. If you enjoy this kind of stuff, there's one book that I would recommend above any other book, and it's Gödel Escher Bach by Douglas Hofstadter, which I've quoted before on this channel. A timeless masterpiece for me. It's one of the best books ever written about why computing is such an endlessly fascinating and philosophically deep subject. And there's plenty of the right kind of maths in that book. There's formal systems, abstractions, a bit of number theory thrown in as a playground. He has a thing called TNT, typographical number theory. And there's logic, derivations and proofs, and paradoxes, because he always makes it good fun. And indeed, other parts of mathematics that are essential to computer science include logic and the art of conducting rigorous proofs. When I was in elementary and middle school, we used to have lots of proofs in the context of geometry. Okay, and proofs of geometry is stuff that goes back to the ancient Greeks, the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Indians, the ancient Chinese, and so forth. But here, as for computing, we are not interested in geometry per se and in the specific results that are being proved. We are rather interested in the mechanisms that transform something that might be a mildly convincing line of reasoning into a rigorous proof. And another branch of mathematics might be number theory. Number theory, like geometry, is not particularly relevant to computing except if you get into specialized fields like public key cryptography. But it is another playground where you can prove basic statements and then build up to not so basic statements. And through that, by doing that, you might gain familiarity with building rigorous proofs. And this will then help you writing correct programs that give the right answer every time, where it would be impossible to actually test all possible combinations of inputs, but it would be possible to prove that your program gives the correct answer for all possible inputs that you might throw at it. Another area you want to study really well to become a better programmer is vectors, multidimensional spaces, matrices. That's stuff you want to know inside out. Not just the definitions which you can pick up in half an hour, but all the ways you manipulate matrices, find a determinant and eigenvalues and eigenvectors, and finding a base for a vector space, expressing a vector as a linear combination of other vectors, linear independence and normalizing orthogonality and all that kind of stuff. Because thinking in terms of multidimensional spaces and having the mathematical fluency to manipulate them is really a mental foundation for so many other things. My original master level university education was as an electronic engineer, the kind of professional who can build hi-fi audio or robots. And for that, I studied a lot of continuous mathematics, calculus and integrals and complex numbers and partial derivatives and Fourier transforms and Laplace transforms and so on. And all this stuff I found really, really interesting at the time, but I then never used it in my professional life as a software developer and later as an academic computer scientist, rather than an amplifier designer, which I never became. And I used to be good at that kind of mathematics back then, but as I said, I've never used it since. And if I picked up my own first year undergraduate textbook a few decades later, I doubt I would still be able to solve the exercises without quite a bit of revision. But there's one particular area of that kind of heavy-duty continuous engineering mathematics that I believe every computer scientist and everyone working in STEM would benefit from being exposed to, and that's systems theory, control theory, the mathematics behind feedback loops. To me, feedback loops are one of the most important concepts of all, not just among all concepts in science and technology, but also in nature, biology, ecology, economics, markets, interpersonal relations, even warfare, even really everything. Okay, I'll never forget that one particular lecture during my third year of my 5-year engineering degree when Professor Gori Giorgi introduced me so vividly to the power of feedback loops. How could a very cheap motor inside your inkjet printer, driving a printer head through a very cheap rubber belt, position the printing head so carefully as to spit a microscopic ink droplet on the page with a precision of about 20 micron, which is the width of the very thinnest of human hairs? How could an equally cheap motor inside a CD player move the laser head so precisely as to make it land exactly on the right track on the CD, where the tracks are only 1.6 micron apart, which is less than a tenth of the thinnest human hair? That's pretty amazing. But that unforgettable morning of many years ago, with just blackboard and chalk, he explained us how it works and how we can make it as precise as we need by using a negative feedback loop. And this was a lecture I will never forget. Probably the most memorable and the most beautiful lecture of my whole engineering degree. I still have my lecture notes from that morning here. Yes, because we used to take handwritten notes, not like today's students that cry if you don't give them pre-made slides. There were no slides. That insight is something that could be communicated very easily in an hour, in half an hour. I could even make a video about that one day. But then, to be able to design working systems based on this, to be able to design a CD player that keeps the laser on the right track, or a hi-fi amplifier that stays linear over all audio frequencies without oscillating, or a self-driving car, or you name it. In other words, to use that knowledge as a real engineer, someone who builds stuff that works, then you do need all those years of mathematics and complex numbers and Laplace transforms and so forth, without which you're just hand-waving and pretending you understand. So I think the maths behind the feedback loops are rather elaborate and require a pretty big investment. And I can understand why not many people, even people in STEM, actually learn them. And we don't even teach them to our own computer science undergraduates, and I think that's a pity. But I'm sure that at least in the engineering department at Cambridge, they learn about them. But I think everyone, and certainly every programmer, should at least gain a basic qualitative understanding of how feedback loops work, of the crucial importance of the accuracy of your observation, without which you are essentially blind to what you're doing in open loop, of the importance of amplifying the difference between your control input that says what you want to do and the negative feedback input that tells you what you're actually doing, and how by amplifying this difference you can do these amazing feats of precision of getting to the track on the CD, and of the importance of the latency on your feedback loop and so on. Because this idea of negative feedback loops recurs in so many different contexts, and it gives you the mental key to solving so many different problems. What else? Well, some familiarity with combinatorics is probably a good idea, and a bit of probability, even though it's not strictly necessary, is going to come in useful to a programmer in many different contexts, so worth investing in that. Of course, almost every specific branch of computer science will then also rely on a particular branch of mathematics. If you are into, you're working in signal processing, then you will need a lot of Fourier transforms. If you do public key cryptography, as we said, you'll need a lot of number theory. And if you are keen about machine learning, like seemingly all of our undergraduate applicants for the past few years, then you had better be fluent on your partial derivatives and maybe figure out what a tensor is and so on. But I'm not interested here about the specific domains that support your specific subfield of computer science. The main point about what maths make you a good programmer is not, in my opinion, what maths you will use as a programmer, but rather what maths will give you a good mental structure, will give you a roadmap, a key to interpret the world. That will make you a better programmer. And that's why I have emphasized the more abstract and the more meta-mathematical parts of mathematics, such as set theory, proofs, logic, and the stuff that maybe doesn't at first sight look like mathematics, but that gives structure to your reasoning. This is, in my opinion, the mathematical core that will make you a better programmer. I hope this helped and it answered your question. And if you enjoyed this video and want more like it, then like, subscribe, and hit the bell for a new video every week, and browse through all the content that's already available on the channel. If you have any more questions about computing, learning, programming, and any of the other topics that we deal with here, drop them in the comments. Thank you very much for staying till the end, and I will very much appreciate you signaling that you did so by saying Arctic Fox in a comment. Goodbye.